Well, welcome and thank you for joining Rackspace Technology today at the Sitecore Symposium. My name is Paul Croteau. I am a channel CTO and I'm serving as your Rackspace moderator today. I've got with me two subject matter experts to talk about containers. Our session is called Contain Yourself, Kubernetes and what it means for your organization. With me, I've got Kelly Rusk, Manager of Technical Support, Sitecore Architect and MVP, and Jimmy Rudley, a Rackspace Technology Azure Architect. And so here's our agenda for today. It's a brief agenda. Let's talk about what are containers, what's Kubernetes, what does it mean for your organization, and what does it mean for you? So Jimmy, let's start with you and help us understand what containers are.
Well, we all know what VMs are. They're full-blown operating systems with application installs that still come with a day-to-day management while all running on top of a hypervisor. Well, containers do not use a hypervisor, but instead share the kernel that the host is using. This means we no longer need to package the operating system, but just the components our application needs to run. What kind of benefits does this introduce? Remember trying to set up your developer environment, trying to get SQL Server to match production settings? Now we can create a container image deploying our exact version of SQL with all the settings packaged up for anyone to consume. Even better, it takes seconds to start and stop a container. That comes with efficiency. Since we're not packaging the operating system anymore, this enables us to run more containers on less hardware. We are just focused on resource utilization that the actual application consumes, not the operating system. Being immutable. The blame game stops here. Worrying about what dependencies are required becomes a thing of the past. What a developer saw on his laptop and in an airplane is the same thing your clients will see when the image is pushed into production. It provides us a standardized method of shipping code. Lastly, the whole dev lifecycle. We try our hardest to become more agile in order to get code into production faster. Since our consistency should be the same no matter what environment we run our code on, the lightweight nature of a Docker image and the actual dependencies removed, we can deploy much faster and more often with less risk.
All right, so then let's take a look at how we would use containers. How do we leverage them, orchestrate, and manage all these things?
Well, this is where Kubernetes comes into play. Kubernetes is an open source project that has grown tremendously over the past few years. It handles automated application deployment, scaling, DNS configuration, storage provisioning, and the health of the cluster via intelligent scheduling and placement of groups of containers, otherwise known as Kubernetes pods. Take the scenario of running a container on the node, but that node fails. Kubernetes will automatically move the container to another node with available resources and bring it online. Okay, I'm sure you're wondering now, what happens if that node doesn't have enough resources for that container? Well, we can use the autoscaler function and provision more nodes automatically to meet our resource usage requirements specified for that workload.
Okay, Kelly, well, let's talk about this some more. What's the big deal about all this stuff?
Well, thanks, Paul. The big deal for a lot of these organizations is really how can they move into a space where they can more rapidly, securely, and in a scalable manner deploy their solutions. They want to reduce risk, reduce cost, and that's a lot of what the value proposition for containers is. When we think about your developers and infrastructure teams, they don't want to spend their days managing infrastructure. They want to go out there and really build, and be successful at it. And containers allow you a very templated but scalable manner to do that, and they're very portable. As Jimmy previously mentioned, and we spoke about, a developer could be anywhere, and they could deploy that base solution, and that will be the same when you go into production. Instead of going through all these different rigors of the underlying system changing all the time, which is really what hurts your organization, reduces your efficiency, and induces risk. So we're thinking about with containers is security in ways that I can ensure that what I'm creating is immutable and able to get up to the cloud quickly with pre-made images that are consistent across the board, a better experience for developers who don't have to spend all day setting up their workstations, better experience for infrastructure teams and how that allows them to flow into their natural processes. And from an executive standpoint, and we're going to break down per role what this really means, a better costing, a better analysis of where their current environment is and where they want to go without the mysteries of other infrastructure issues that come up in the middle of the night. So let's break it down by role. You've got executive leadership. Maybe you're a marketing team member. You could be an infrastructure team lead or team member or a developer. While containers don't change for you individually, they do impact you in different ways, or at least you have different concerns when it comes into the container space. So we just kind of want to evaluate that, and we'll jump in first and maybe speak to the executive layer. So as an executive, one of the biggest things you're always thinking about is how can I reduce cost and risk my organization while being able to scale quickly to meet my needs? And this is where containers has a lot of that value proposition. First, from a cost perspective, a lot of cost savings with less compute resources, given the technical dynamic that containers bring into your environment. Faster deployment. If you don't have to go with inconsistency, you can now deploy your solutions faster in a more reliable manner, which again brings into reducing risk and cost. There's an implicit cost of having your workforce being tied up in all these issues and not working on their solution. When we think about the reduced risk of more security, that's the baseline we're really looking at here. If we have consistent experience, you can ensure that what you're developing and what you're testing is what ends up in your production environment. And from an executive level, that gives you peace at night knowing that much like an assembly line, everything is flowing through the way that it should. And in that dynamic, it allows you to future-proof a little bit too. You're going to bleed with any new technology. But as an executive trying to make a decision about if containers is right for your organization, you can look at that future-proofing with some of these other things that haven't really existed before to put yourself at rest. And a lot of that comes down to portability. If I'm able to develop something and port that all the way through the process, much like that assembly line, that gives me a good idea of where I can go and what I can do. No matter what the cloud, my solution can live anywhere, whether it's on premises or up in Azure, AWS, or bring your own cloud solution. Be remiss if we didn't mention some challenges, right? These are some changes to your governance. So you will have some short-term changes for long-term gains. And usually these come in line of DevOps. But those efficiencies, once you go through that business transformation, are incredible. It's literally taking your organization from this to quickly just matching the puzzle pieces right up where you got everything solved. But you have to go through that process first to solve those key understandings of what the containers are. And what we're hoping to do today is to explain that to you at an executive level, that any kind of change in business transformation is going to have impact. But the benefits when we think about less time managing your infrastructure and more time developing solutions is the value proposition that has that long-standing industry support that's going to propel you forward as an organization.
Let's talk about marketing, something near and dear to your heart.
Now, if I work in marketing, which is a big part of the Sitecore stack, I'm quickly thinking about my campaigns all day and night. Hopefully not all night. I'm looking at capabilities to say, can I quickly scale up what's going on in my campaigns or do mini campaigns and tear them down quickly? In a pure infrastructure world, it's difficult to do that because your underlying infrastructure has to be built, has to go through all these layers before you even have your solution at play that you're going to run your marketing campaign on. So as a marketer, what is really exciting about this is that I can quickly scale resources for marketing campaigns. Let's say it's a Super Bowl and I've got a special campaign going on. Am I resting assured that my infrastructure can scale quite quickly? While acknowledging that regular traditional infrastructure has scalability to it, containers bring an additional layer of scalability with multi-node capabilities and images that are consistent across the board. So if you need to scale up for the Super Bowl and reach out to millions, you can do that with a lot less cost via the traditional infrastructure models. This also gives you more time for your developers to support your campaigns. Nothing is more terrifying as a marketer than having a campaign fail because of a development mistake or something else occurring. And that's where that mindset of having that fast and rapid deployment and developers supporting you allows you to have more successful campaigns, and with less cost on the infrastructure, that's more that can be redirected to your campaigns and your campaign success. Now, when I think about a campaign as a marketer, I may want to be able to stand one up and tear one down and maybe have a container or template that I can just throw right up into the cloud anytime it's time for our annual St. Patrick's promotion or whatever promotion you may have in your organization. And from a marketing play again, this gives you those quick capabilities to scale. While it is infrastructure, the underlying implications allow your marketing campaigns to ramp up quickly and ramp down as appropriate. And when you think about measuring these campaigns, there's a whole community around these containers to allow easier integration with your CRM, your Salesforce. If you have digital asset management, whatever you have, there may be several pre-made images. So all that time that you're spending trying to create these underlying infrastructure and solution to get to this endpoint, you could literally pick something off the shelf in many situations, get your campaign running, throw it into the cloud, scale it, and bring it back down with ease. And we've left a quick URL here on the slide where you can see just the compilation of beautiful images out there to support you. As an infrastructure individual on a team, I'm thinking, can I scale? Do I have flexibility and reduced risk? While it's fun and can be exciting in the middle of the night to resolve infrastructure issues, the goal of containers is to take some of that away and really focus on, do I have a predictable underlying infrastructure I can depend upon? When we think about virtual machines or even PaaS or SaaS solutions, they have some of those components, but they don't have quite the flexibility where you can port them anywhere. And this is the big deal for the infrastructure teams, portability. If a developer out in the field gets off an airplane, has their image ready to go and your container set to go, you're ready to deploy. And of course, test that. But now with that portability and being able to deploy anywhere, you can take this solution and meet any demands. And even for DR scenarios, you're now further empowered where you don't have to worry about hot scenarios or other things. And you have a smaller footprint on top of it. That hypervisor layer is gone. So now with this container, small, portable, you've got speedy deployment to put it up with an easier rollback situation because everything is encapsulated. Right here, you've got your cube. You know where it is. If you need to scale your resources up and down or even out horizontally, from an infrastructure perspective, containers offer more ease of use. And as we mentioned during the executive slide, there is some governance. So you will need to change and maybe do some DevOps considerations. But once you learn how your DevOps plays into this, especially the ops part of this, and we'll talk about the dev in a moment, you're able to control a vast wider dynamic for a larger impact, including reusable templates that you can develop or take off the shelf for your organization. You can have improved security via isolation, because security is what keeps many infrastructure-focused individuals up all night. And keep this away from the host systems. Let it be a true application with its own immutable namespace. And when you think about, can I afford this container play? You're going to have less resources, which means it's more budget friendly. Bearing in mind, you also have to counteract that with the governance and get some experience before you go widely into the world. So test this into your dev environment, and you'll be pleasantly surprised by how easy it is to port into your production and even DR scenarios.
Okay, Kelly, when I think Kubernetes, my personal take, I think developers. So let's talk about development teams.
Well, this is where it all really comes down to. The developers claim that containers is all about them. And they're right in many ways because it allows them really a consistent developer environment so they can focus on solution building. The main frustration for developers is that all day, for a good part of their day, before they start developing, they have to set up their work environment. So they have to get their VMs or their PaaS solution, the networking setup, the security setup, everything set up. And then they have to integrate their GitHub and all their deployments and all these different aspects, which is a major drain. If you query any developer, they're going to say the worst part of developing is the setup. And containers eases a lot of that pain. You still, from a governance perspective, there's the dev part of the DevOps, need to change a little bit for getting your base workstation set up. But what you develop now in that containerized environment allows you great consistency where your solution doesn't have to worry about OS patches or the underlying infrastructure. You can literally hand off, here is the solution. and instead of saying, here is my part of the solution. And even from a modular aspect, you can take these containers and have little modules and each one live in a container. So all because there's a container mindset doesn't mean that you still can't take those good MVC principles or any kind of modular aspects from a developer aspect and have those as separate containers within that nice Kubernetes orchestration that Jimmy spoke of. So from a developer standpoint, at the very base, that portability, the isolation methods to prevent resources impacting what you're doing at the very base level allows you to really be successful. We talked about how modular this can be and breaking up your solution across containers. I can't emphasize that enough, that your design patterns that you already employ are ready and ripe for containers. You could create an image, spin up environments as you need to, and just go back to that base and play with layers and then create a new image from that. You can keep a whole history of your images in a way that you could roll back quite quickly and test like you've never tested before. Pre-made applications, your favorite applications. Get your Sitecore template up and not spend your whole day setting up Sitecore and having to worry about that. Maybe you have a Node.js app. Maybe you're thinking about headless applications. You could create these images once and deploy them aplenty without having to go install Windows or Linux or whatever other operating system you might want to play with, and build these things up and have to worry about all those levels again. Developers shine when they're up here at the solution. And let's take away that pain down here. And that's where containers bring in that capability for developers. And we think about this holistically across your environment, whether you're a developer, an infrastructure team member, a marketer, or an executive. This consistency and portability, knowing that across your environments, that what you create is what is deployed, is the value proposition of containers and what will really lead you to a better place. Forewarning, you have to walk slowly into it, observe your governance, change your DevOps a little, but those short-term pains you're going to go through create innumerable gains across the board for your organization.
All right, guys. Well, Jimmy, Kelly, I appreciate your time and input today. It's very valuable stuff. I'm looking forward to hearing from our partners and customers out there and talking more about containers and Kubernetes in general. So thanks, guys, for your help.
Oh, no,
I
thank you,
appreciate the
Paul.
time.
I appreciate the time, and hopefully this values the community.